When was the last time you acted like you were already successful, not imagined it, not wished for it, actually behaved like it was already true? Because there's a growing idea online that if you start acting like the future version of yourself today, your brain slowly adjusts to it. But there's a problem with that idea that almost nobody talks about. It works until it doesn't. This concept is often described as acting like you are already successful. The idea is simple. Instead of waiting to feel confident, disciplined, or ready, you start behaving like the version of you that already has those traits. So instead of thinking, I'll work harder when I become serious about my goals, you think, a serious version of me would already be doing this. That might look like showing up earlier to work, organizing your day more intentionally, speaking more confidently in conversations, making decisions based on long-term thinking instead of short-term comfort. But here's the important distinction. This is not about pretending your problems don't exist. It's about testing a different set of behaviors and seeing what happens. Let's make this concrete. Example 1, fitness. Someone who sees themselves as a fit person doesn't rely on motivation every day. They might still feel tired, still feel lazy, still want to skip the gym, but they go anyway because in their mind, that's what a fit person does. They are not waiting to become fit before acting like it. They are acting like it first. Example 2, work/career. Imagine someone trying to build a business. There are two ways they can approach it. One version waits for confidence. I'll take it seriously when I feel more ready. The other version behaves differently. A serious entrepreneur would probably structure their day, set goals, and actually follow through. Even if they don't feel like an entrepreneur yet, they start acting like one. Example 3, social confidence. In social situations, some people wait to feel confident before speaking up, but others experiment with a different approach. What would a confident version of me say in this moment? They don't become confident instantly, but over time, their behavior shifts first. And confidence often follows behavior, not the other way around. Now here's where it gets interesting. Psychology actually helps explain why this works and why it can fail. 1, identity-based behavior. We don't just act based on who we are, we also slowly become what we repeatedly act like. If you repeatedly behave in a disciplined way, your brain starts to categorize that behavior as normal for me. Not instantly, but gradually. 2, cognitive dissonance. There's also something called cognitive dissonance. That's the mental discomfort we feel when our actions don't match our self-image. So if you act like a disciplined person but constantly behave in an inconsistent way, your brain feels tension. That tension can go two ways. You give up and revert to old habits, or you adjust your behavior to reduce the discomfort. In the second case, behavior slowly starts shifting toward consistency. 3, dopamine and expectation shift. Your brain is constantly predicting what you are going to do next. If your behavior starts changing, those predictions start shifting too. For example, if you stop skipping workouts repeatedly, your brain begins to expect activity instead of avoidance. That doesn't mean motivation appears magically. It means the resistance to action can slowly decrease over time. 4, the key limitation, but here's the part people often ignore. Acting like a successful person does not replace skill, effort, repetition, real feedback from the world. If you only act without building anything real, nothing changes externally. At best, you are rehearsing behavior. At worst, you are avoiding real progress by pretending. So what actually works? The useful version of this idea is not, I'm already successful, therefore I don't need to change anything. That leads nowhere. The useful version is, I will experiment with behaviors that a more capable version of me would use and see what improves. That means act with structure, but still measure results, act confident, but still learn from failure, act disciplined, but still adjust when something doesn't work. It's not identity replacement, it's behavior testing. So does acting like you are already successful actually work? The honest answer is, it can influence your behavior, and your behavior can influence your direction, but it doesn't replace the real work required to actually get somewhere. So what actually works? Because if you strip away all the internet noise around this idea, you're left with two completely different interpretations, and they lead to very different outcomes. The first version sounds like this: I am already successful, therefore I don't need to change anything. That sounds confident on the surface, but in practice it usually leads to stagnation, because nothing in your environment actually changes just because you decide it internally. If your behavior stays the same, your results stay the same, and eventually reality catches up, not immediately, but consistently. Now the second version is where things get more interesting. I will experiment with behaviors that a more capable version of me would use and see what improves. That's a very different mindset. It's not claiming identity, it's testing behavior. You're not saying, this is who I am. You're saying, let's see what happens if I act differently for a while. That shift matters more than people realize because now you've turned success into something measurable instead of something imagined. So, what does that actually look like in real life? It breaks down into a few simple but important patterns. First, act with structure but still measure results. A lot of people misunderstand structure. They think it means rigidity. Wake up early, follow a routine, force discipline. But structure without feedback is just repetition. So the useful version looks like this. You build some form of structure in your day, but you observe it. You ask, is this actually helping me move forward? Or does it just make me feel productive? Because feeling productive and being productive are not the same thing. And this is where most people get stuck. They copy behaviors that look successful instead of tracking whether those behaviors actually produce results. Second, act confident but still learn from failure. This is another place where people go too far in one direction. Some people think acting confident means never questioning yourself, but that turns into ego very quickly. And ego doesn't adjust, it defends. The more useful version is more subtle. You can speak, act, and move with confidence in a situation, while still internally treating outcomes as feedback, not identity. So if something doesn't work, you don't collapse into, I'm not that person. You just update the approach. That's it. Confidence becomes a behavior, not a fixed identity. Third, act disciplined, but still adjust when something doesn't work. This is probably the most misunderstood part. People think discipline means forcing yourself to continue something no matter what. But real discipline isn't blind repetition, it's consistency with awareness. There's a difference between pushing through resistance that is temporary and continuing a strategy that clearly isn't working. One builds progress, the other builds frustration. So the successful version of you isn't someone who never stops. It's someone who notices when something is inefficient and adapts without quitting entirely. Now, if you step back, you'll notice something important. None of this requires pretending you are already successful, and none of it requires waiting until you become someone else either. It sits in the middle, a testing phase, a behavioral experiment. So does acting like you are already successful actually work? The honest answer is it can influence your behavior, and your behavior can influence your direction. But it doesn't replace the real work required to actually get somewhere. It doesn't remove skill building, it doesn't remove repetition, and it doesn't remove failure. What it does is something much smaller but more practical. It lets you temporarily step outside your current habits and ask, what would change if I behaved slightly differently today? Not dramatically, not perfectly, just differently enough to create variation. In the end, it's not about pretending you've already arrived. It's about testing what happens when you stop waiting to behave differently and just start. Because sometimes the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not who you are, it's what you do next.